Welcome to the Great Canadian Piggy Bank, helping Canadian parents raise money smart kids. It's tax season, and so today we're going to talk about taxes, but not just how to file them. We're going to be looking at how the tax system actually shows up across the different stages of raising kids. I'm joined today by Adrian Bar, also known as Canadian in T-shirt, who's known for breaking down Canadian taxes in a way that makes sense. And today he's going to help parents understand how to use the system instead of just reacting to it. Welcome, Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Crispy, for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about taxes, especially right now. Tax season is right around the corner.
Okay, so the first phase, when they're young kids.
Yes.
So I've heard about this double dip that you can do. How can an RSP contribution lower your taxes and increase monthly Canadian child benefits?
Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we're talking about the CCB double dipping. And the reason why it's called double dipping is because it's a really cool strategy that allows you to maximize the free monthly income you would get from the Canada Child Benefit Program, which is a program everyone gets if you have children. Combine that with RSP tax deductions and a tax refund. And this can be a really powerful strategy if you use the right way. The absolute maximum you could get if you have a child in Canada is $8,000, depending on their age, how many children you have, and your income. But the income is the main deciding factor. Because if you are at a certain income threshold, this year it's $81,000, now you have CCB clawback, meaning that you're going to get reduced by a percentage amount for any amount above that threshold. That's where the RRSP double dipping strategy can come in, because with the RRSP, if you put in $10,000 into your RRSP retirement plan, so even though on paper you earned $90,000 salary, because you contributed $10,000 to your RRSP, you're only taxed as if you made $80,000. And now you are below that $81,000 CCB clawback threshold. So because you contributed $10,000 to your RSP, you get an extra, in that sense, you'll get an extra $300 in your pocket. Plus, you also get the tax benefit of the RSP. So that's why it's called like the CCB double dip, because you really get to combine the benefits of keeping your income below the CCB a clawback threshold, and you get the RSP tax deduction benefits. So if you combine them together, it can be very powerful, especially if your income is above that 81,000 threshold. If you're like around 80K, 90K, 100K, it can be really worthwhile to run the numbers and see if it's possible to contribute 10K, 20K to your RSP to bring yourself below that threshold. Those numbers can really work for you. Go on the CRA website, go look up CCB calculator, and you'll see exactly how much you'll get a year, a month. Again, in Canada, if you're working a full-time job, it's hard to change your income. But the one thing that all Canadians have is the RSP, and that's a really effective way to reduce your taxable income. That's only if you have one kid. If you have more children, the CCB clawback rate actually goes up. Right? So for one child, it's like 3.2% if your income is above 81,000. But if you have 3 children, it jumps up to like 8%. If you have 4 or 5 kids, it's even higher. So the more children you have, the more pronounced, the more amplified this benefit can be if you can keep your income below that threshold. And the RSP is the best way to bring that income down.
Yeah, agreed. And for everybody listening, Adrian and I are really actually this excited. we were totally nerding out before we started the episode, and we were nerding out so hard over Norbert Gambit. This is genuinely excitement on both of our parts.
That's why we get along. You need money nerds in your life. And when money nerds come together, we're unstoppable.
I know. Okay, so then how do parents decide whether to do RSP or TFSA when they're thinking about CCB?
So, see, here's the thing. TFSA versus RSP is one of those age-old questions. And it depends on so many factors. Namely, what do you need the money for? How flexible do you need it? Is this money that you will not touch until retirement? Or is this money that you might need to withdraw for shorter-term, mid-term goals? And on the flip side of that, what do you think your income or what do you think your tax bracket will be during retirement, right? It really does depend on like a myriad of factors. Bottom line, like on a purely numerical, mathematical sense, the way the TFSA and RSP works is that all else being equal, if your tax bracket in your working years, like today, is the same as your tax bracket in retirement, then mathematically speaking, the TFSA and the RSP are equivalent. Now, where the RRSP can actually outperform the TFSA is when you're in a higher tax bracket now during your working years than you will be in retirement. Meaning, like, let's say you're in the second or third tax bracket today while you're working, you have a high income job, but during retirement, you'll probably be in a lower tax bracket. You might be in the second, maybe even the first tax bracket. In that case, mathematically speaking, the RSP will actually earn you more money than the TFSA. If you're in the first tax bracket, in that case, the RSP is probably not your best bet because you're already at the lowest possible tax rate.
Yeah.
There's no way that in retirement, you're going to be taxed even lower than you are from the first tax bracket. The first is as low as you can go. So in that case, if you're in the first tax bracket, generally speaking, TFSA is the way to go because there are no downsides to the TFSA. It can't possibly hurt you. It works for everyone. And there's no stress, no limits, there's no worries in terms of withdrawing. Whenever you withdraw money, that money's yours to keep. No tax, no stress, none of that. RSP, it really starts to win that race when in the second tax bracket, especially in the third, fourth tax bracket. That's when it comes into play. Now, to add an extra wrinkle into the story, you have to consider the CCB. So if you don't have any kids, then you don't really have to worry about this. But like I said earlier, if you do have children, especially more than one child, and then at that point, the CCB clawback can really start to take its toll. And if you're at that income that's close to that $81,000 threshold, let's say you're 90K, 100K, in that case, again, I'm not going to say that RSP is always going to be better. It really depends on what your retirement income might look like. Like a lot of people, in today's era, we don't have as much, defined retirement pension plans like we used to back in decades previous. But if you are, lucky to have a job where they pay you a really nice pension in combination with CCP, in combination with all your retirement investments, there are certain people who actually will have a substantial retirement income and thus will be in a high tax bracket during retirement years. In that case, RSP might not be the best for them if they really think that they're still going to maintain a high income in the retirement years. But all that to say is that if your income is around 90K, 100K, and you do have children, our RSP definitely takes an extra lead in that case versus the TFSA, because with the RSP, you can bring your income down below that threshold and save extra money that you would have gotten clawed back from the CCB. With the TFSA, you can't reduce your income. You don't get taxed on your withdrawals, but you also don't get to reduce your income on the contributions. Only the RSP allows you to do that. Well, RSP and the FHSA, which we'll get to later in the show.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the teen phase. So let's think of a scenario where a 16-year-old has made $3,000 and owes no tax. So why should they still file?
Yes. So bottom line, everybody should file their taxes. I don't care if you're a 16-year-old working a part-time job. I don't care if you're a college kid. File your taxes. And a lot of people are probably scared of it because they're intimidated. They don't really know how to file taxes. I'm telling you, in today's era, we are so spoiled. We have TurboTax, we have U-File, we have Simple Tax. The CRA will actually file taxes for you in certain situations now. There's never been an easier time in Canadian history to file taxes than it is today. It's all digital. It holds your hand and guides you through the process. So I promise you, filing your own taxes is so much easier than most people think. And you don't need to go to H&R Block and pay $120 to have them file your taxes for you. If you're an average Canadian working a full-time job, working a part-time job, I promise you, your taxes are extremely simple. You probably just have a T4 tax slip. You might have some RSP contributions, maybe some investment income, but other than that, it's very simple. But my point being is that don't be intimidated by filing taxes. It is super simple. For most students, teenagers, college kids, university kids, I'm not going to give any guarantees, but the vast majority of them will not pay $1 in taxes. Why? Because in Canada, we have something called the basic personal tax amount. In 2026, that amount is about $16,000. What that means is that everybody in Canada, we do not pay taxes on the first $16,000 of our income. And most teenagers working a part-time job, most university kids, even if they're working like a summer job, like a co-op job, most of them will not earn more than $16,000. And if they do, there's still a whole bunch of tuition credits and all these different tax benefits to bring that number down even further. So I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, they won't pay $1 in taxes. In fact, they'll probably receive money from the government because there are so many tax credits, tax deductions, refundable tax credits, non-refundable tax credits. There's all these different like provincial and federal programs to help young people, to help students, and to help low-income Canadians, including students. So if you don't file your tax return, you're not learning how to do it. Two, you're kind of setting yourself up for bad financial habits. You're kind of making a boogeyman out of tax filing when it really shouldn't be. Three, since you're not filing your tax return, you're not declaring your income, you're also not building any RRSP room. As you get older, especially as your income grows, the RRSP can be a super weapon to jumpstart your financial journey and lower your taxable income. But you need to build that contribution room. And you can only build that contribution room for the RRSP if you have declared taxable income. So while you're a teenager earning $3,000 a year, definitely file your taxes. You won't pay $1 in taxes, but you will build 18% of that income as RSP room. And even if you don't use the RSP for like 5-10 years, doesn't matter. That contribution room is never lost. It's always accumulating in the background. Number three reason why you should absolutely file your taxes is because usually for most of these tax credits and tax benefits that the government would pay you money for, one of the requirements is that you need to file your tax returns. If you don't file your tax returns, you don't qualify for most of those benefits. I promise you, it is not nearly as scary as you think it is. And the benefits can really, really add up in terms of getting free money from the government, in terms of those tax credits, tax benefits. Number two, building that RSP room, which is really going to set yourself up for success down the line. And number three, I promise you, for most students, especially if you're earning less than $16,000, you probably won't pay $1 in tax.
Okay, so then this one in particular, I'm really interested in because I'm now just starting to turn my sights into RESPs. So when it's finally time to take money out of the RESP for school, what is the 13-week rule and who should be paying the tax on those withdrawals, the parent or the student?
You have three buckets of money. You have your original contributions, the money that you yourself as the parent put in, up to $50,000. You have the government grant, that's the free money you got from the government, up to $7,200 per child. And then bucket number three is the accumulated income. That's the investment income, dividends, capital gains, all that. All three of those buckets are in your RESP. But when you withdraw that money, whether you or the child withdraws that money, it gets taxed or handled differently depending on which bucket that money is coming from. So if you're withdrawing from the original contribution, the money that you put in, I always recommend that's the money you should touch last. And the reason for that is because the other buckets of money, the grant money and the accumulated income, that money can only be withdrawn once your child is actually in school. The original contribution can be withdrawn anytime, but the EAP withdrawals with the that includes the grant money and the income. That's the money that you really want to withdraw as soon as possible while your child is in school. And ideally, you want to deplete that money because that money isn't really your money. And the whole point, the reason why the government gave you that money was for your child to be in school. Number two is that when the child withdraws that money, that withdrawal will be taxed. But here's the catch. It's taxed under your child's name, which is great news. So even if they withdraw money from the RESP, they probably won't pay $1 in taxes. The other wrinkles you mentioned is that the 13-week rule. So what that means is that for the first semester, the first 13 weeks, there is a limitation on how much your child can withdraw from the EAPs, from the government grant portion and the accumulated income portion. They can't withdraw the whole amount right away. They're limited. This year, the limit is $8,000 for the first semester. After the 13 weeks have passed, then they can withdraw whatever they want from that EAP portion. But in the first semester, they are limited to $8,000. If they need more than $8,000 for their tuition, for their rent, for their textbooks, whatever their student expenses are, they can always withdraw from the original contribution amount. That part has no limits. It's not taxable at all. It's your money. It's not the government's money. But I always suggest always withdraw from the EAP first. Take out the $8,000 limit if you can, right? If not, next semester, try to withdraw that money as soon as possible because you don't want to be in the position where your child graduates from the school and they still have EAP money sitting there. Because once they're out of school, after 6 months, if they withdraw the money, it will be fully taxable and they might have to give the grant money back. So while your child is in school, prioritize those withdrawals first. Use up the government's money as it was intended to be used. Once that's all done, then start withdrawing from your original contributions. Or again, if you are in the first 13 weeks and you need more than $8,000, then you can withdraw from the original contributions just to top that up. But you should always prioritize the EAP withdrawals first.
Interesting. And okay, this is a dumb question because I've not withdrawn RESPs yet. Can you physically see the difference of the EAP versus your
this
base?
will
how do you pull from one bucket and not the other?
It will depend on your brokerage, right?
Okay.
If you have like, a bank's mutual fund, if you're using an investing platform like Questrade or
I'm using Wealthsim.
Is that when you request an RESP withdrawal, you can designate where this money is coming from. Is it going to be classified as an EAP withdrawal? Is it going to be classified as different brokerages call it different things? Like if you're withdrawing from the original contribution, it could be called like a refund of contribution. There's other words for it. The refund of contribution or a PSE. Some brokerages will call it that. But
interesting.
You really want, if you have any questions, always talk to your brokerage, talk to their support, and really make sure you understand exactly where this money is coming from. They get to designate, do I want this to be an EAP payment withdrawal, or do I want this to be a original contribution withdrawal?
This is blowing my mind.
Well,
there's so many things that are just
there's a lot.
Not obvious.
It's really not simple.
Yeah.
And like the rules change. Like, I mean, like the funny thing is like, so I made a video on RESP Explained. Like I made a whole like series of how RESP withdrawals
I was watching.
I made that video like 6 years ago. But back then, the 13-week limit was $5,000. Now it's $8,000. So the rules change and they can be hard to keep track of. And if I'm being brutally honest, like the government resources, like the CRA website, they make it intentionally complicated. Like the words they use, the acronyms they use, even just like the webpage itself, it's not all on one page. It counts you around the different links. It's so hard to navigate.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why, like, I started my YouTube channel to begin with, and you started your podcast, right? Yeah. Like, we really, as Canadians, we need like better resources where we can learn these basics in like a down-to-earth, simple English, simple language. Not trying to like confuse folks, right?
Yeah.
Like they hear something like the 13-week rule, like they're like, "What do you mean I'm limited?" Like that doesn't, like, why? It's hard to classify why exactly they are. It's hard to articulate to people. And then they start to get, oh my God, all these rules, all these restrictions, all these conditions. I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to give my money to someone else and let them manage it for me, right?
Totally. I agree.
I get why people feel that way, but I promise you, like, if you do take the time, try to read through the CRA website if you're brave enough.
There's no way anyone is going to read through this.
I did, right? I went through the pain. So
that's why I watch your videos. Exactly. I'm like, what does Adrian say? What's the top highlights? I need to know.
That's the key. You can find certain trustworthy websites, people on YouTube, people on Instagram, people on podcasts. Watch our videos for like, inspiration or to open your eyes to new strategies you never heard of. But don't just like take my word for gospel. Don't just blindly say what I preach. I'm talking about what I'm doing with my money, but use my lessons as like a springboard, as a starting point to like, okay, that is an interesting idea. Let me look more into this. And then once I look more into it, maybe I can fine tune or like customize this to work for my particular situation.
Okay, so then
let's
talk about young adults. And this is a big one that's happening across a lot of parents, talking about helping kids with their first home. So, and then the FHSA is a new account that's been introduced in the last couple of years into Canada. So talk a little bit about what an FHSA is. Sure. And also, if a parent or a grandparent has $8,000 to gift to their 18-year-old, is it better to go into the FHSA or add it to their TFSA?
Right. Okay. So I love this question because, again, this is one of those situations where there's like the numerical, mathematical approach, but then there's also the whole like behavioral approach and the emotional aspect. So from a purely mathematical aspect, the FHSA is superior. It has all the benefits of the TFSA, and you get extra tax refunds from the government because of the tax deduction portion of it. Now, that is all contingent on the fact that you will be using the FHSA to eventually buy a home in Canada. Exactly. And you have to buy a home within 15 years. Because for the FHSA, you can't keep it open forever. You can't, keep it open for 40 years and then buy a home in retirement. No. You can only keep this account open for 15 years. So let's say, back to your example, if you're 18 years old, grandmother wants to gift $8,000 to their 18-year-old grandchild, and they have to decide TFSA or FHSA. If they're 18 years old in 15 years, they're going to be 33 years old.
Yeah.
That's it's pretty good odds that they will buy a house within 15 years.
Still pretty young, though. Still pretty young.
It's still pretty young. So I know you have to really sit down and do a real self-assessment. If there's a very, very high likelihood that they will buy a home within 15 years, then I say go for the FHSA. Maximize that first. But if you can only pick one, I would prioritize the FHSA. But let's say you don't even know if you're going to be buying a house in Canada.
Yeah.
Maybe you have your sights set on like moving to the States or moving to Europe or somewhere like that. In that case, TFSA is way more flexible because you withdraw that money fully tax-free. Again, with the TFSA, the best case scenario is to use it for retirement, let it grow tax-free and accumulate for years and decades. But you always have that flexibility with the TFSA. You can always choose to withdraw it if you want, money to buy a car, down payment for a house, money for school, whatever it is. You have that flexibility with the TFSA that you don't get with the FHSA. The FHSA is really used for buying a home. TFSA can be used for anything. And again, if you are going to be leaving Canada, TFSA, 100% flexible, withdraw all that money tax-free, move it to the new country, no worries. FHSA, you can't do that. It's only used if you're buying a home in Canada. Likewise, if you think you're just never going to buy a home, I still say the FHSA is a good idea. Why? Because in 15 years, who knows where your life will be.
Yeah.
Maybe you get married, you have kids, and now maybe when you were 18, 20, 21, you didn't think of buying a home. But once you're in your 30s and you have a kid, you have a family, you have people depending on you, your priorities change. Maybe you change your mind and you do want to buy a home. FHSA, you have that 15-year wiggle room to make that decision. But worst case scenario, if you never, ever buy a home in 15 years, that money is not lost. You can always transfer that money into an RRSP, into your retirement savings.
Amazing.
And the benefit there is that, again, you're not taxed on that withdrawal. It's considered as if you contributed to the RSP directly. So the way I look at it is this. With the FHSA, even if you never buy a home, the worst case scenario is that the FHSA is like a gift of an extra $40,000 of RSP room. That's the worst case scenario. Technically speaking, if you don't want to transfer to your RSP, you can withdraw the money, but it will be fully taxed. The same as an RSP. So you really, and if you do that, if you're in that situation, you've really wasted all the benefits of the FHSA. So, with the FHSA, the best way to use it to get the most bang for your buck is to use it as intended, to buy a home. If you're never going to buy a home in 15 years, then transfer it to your RSP instead. In that case, you have some flexibility on how to use it, when to withdraw that thing. But bottom line, TFSA versus RSP, again, depends on a bunch of things.
Mind-blowing.
TFSA is super flexible. There's no downsides. It will always benefit you. FHSA can be more powerful, especially if you're going to buy a home within the next 15 years. If you're not sure if you're even going to live in Canada, TFSA is the way to go because you get the most flexibility.
Yeah. So I find it so fascinating just trying to think about all the different strategies. It's like when you go to the grocery store and you choose the line, you want it to be the fastest, and it's always the slowest, the one you choose. And you're like, come on.
It's if it was purely mathematical, you could just write a computer program to optimize it.
Totally.
But you have to, like you said earlier, there's the emotional aspect, there's the behavioral aspect, there's the, some people like me, I like investing. When I invest my money, that money is out of my mind. I know that I'm not going to touch that money for 10 years, 20 years. Other people aren't like that. When they invest money, they're always thinking about they're always tempted to withdraw. They're always tempted to spend it. Or they might not be as, financially stable to part that money with the intent of not touching it for 20 years. In that case, something like a TFSA is always going to be a little bit better because they have that flexibility. They're not penalized for withdrawing the money early. So you really have to do a self-assessment of not just the numerical, the tax rates and the dollar numbers. You also have to think about, how you handle debt, how you handle having money locked away, how you handle, emergency expenses, how they come up. Do you have an emergency fund to deal with that? Or are you going to be in a situation where you're going to be tempted to pull from your investments, whether that's your TFSA or worst case, your RRSP?
Yeah.
you really have to sit down and do a true self-assessment and see how I can handle those unexpected situations. That can really direct which one you should prioritize. But again, in an ideal world, you want to max them all out. There's no reason to be investing in a taxable account and pay taxes on your dividends when you have tax shelter room waiting for you. So max out the tax shelter room as you can. Now, which one you prioritize first, it depends on many factors.
Yep. Okay. That was a big one. Okay. You answered all my questions for this phase, all in that answer. So
that's a problem when you get me on a podcast. Once you ask me a question, you put a mic in my hand. Oh my God, I'm going to go off. You're gone. 10 minutes.
That's very exciting stuff. So I'm going to ask a summary question then. If you had to simplify this entire playbook into 3 rules for parents, what would they be?
Okay, so I would say we'll do 1 rule for each phase. In the accumulation phase, like, the young child phase from 0 to 15, let's say, the name of the game is accumulation. Try to maximize as much tax sheltered benefits as you can. Try to maximize as much grant money, as much CCB payments you can. So keep your income below the threshold to maximize the annual CCB money you get. Put in $2,500 every year per child into the RESP to maximize that RESP free grant money. And just try to maximize, accumulate, get as much free money from the government as you can. Phase number 2, that's when your child is in their teenage years. Teach your teenager that financial habits. Teach them how to file their own taxes. Transform their thinking into like, oh my God, this is a scary, icky thing, into no, this is just a financial habit. And a great way like to incentivize that is you're gonna get $500 of free credit, GST credit, if you file your taxes. If you don't get this free money, right? So teach those lessons and make tax filing, tax strategy, tax planning a habit for your teenage child. And then phase 3, when your child is an adult, really start to get creative with different tax planning strategies. Learn where you should prioritize the tax sheltered room. Always try to max out the tax sheltered room if you can, and learn how to move the money in a creative way. And also think about it this way: whether your child, if you want to treat them as a dependent or as their own independent thing, really think of tax planning as a family unit. I don't care about my taxes and my wife's taxes and my child's taxes. I care about the family's taxes. So find out ways to income split, whether that's doing spousal RSPs or maybe like transferring tuition credits from your child to the parents. Find ways where the family as a whole can save money and keep more money in their pocket. From the tax government standpoint, find a way to lower your tax bill for the whole family as a whole unit. And that's the name of the game, really. If you can do those 3 things, accumulate, build a financial habits, and learn how to, maximize tax benefits and lower tax bills for the whole family, you're going to be set up for success, for long-term financial freedom.
Easy.
It's so easy when you say it like that. That's all you got to do.
It's easy. Just do that.
Just do that.
Awesome. Thank you for your time today, Adrian. That was amazing.
Oh, my pleasure. This was fun.
That was so exciting. What really stood out to me for this conversation is how the tax system isn't just about something that happens in April. It's something that quietly rewards certain decisions at different stages of your child's life. When they're young, small shifts like how you contribute to an RRSP can change the amount of support your family receives. When they start working, a simple habit like filing a tax return can open doors later, even if nothing feels urgent in the moment. As they step into adulthood, the choices around accounts like FHSA and the TFSA start to shape much bigger opportunities down the road. If you're in the middle of filing taxes right now, hopefully this has given you a few useful tips to think about. If you found this helpful, please share it with another parent who might need it. I'm Christy Ray, and this is the Great Canadian Piggy Bank, helping Canadian parents raise money-smart kids.